Friends, sometimes it's said there's two kinds of people. For example, you've got cat people and you've got dog people. You've got, let me see, morning people, and you've got, people want to strangle morning people, right? You've got Democrats, you've got Republicans. You've got males, you've got Scott and Kathy here. You've got Cub fans for these Chicago people, and then you've got people with a realistic hope. Ooh. You've got people who think there's two kinds of people, and you've got people that say, nah, it's more complicated than that, isn't it? So there are so many differences in our world. Does that mean there has to be conflict, or can we say, viva la différence? Sometimes people come towards Jesus and they say, the trouble with this Jesus is he divides people. Jesus makes it us against them. And honestly, when you look around the world, you can see often it's religion against religion. You can look at the history of Christianity and see some wild evil. It started this epistle reading here as Paul writes to this Christian churches that he had founded across Galatia. We call it Turkey Day. Paul almost seems to start with this two kind of people thinking. He says in verse 15, we ourselves, he had just been talking about Peter and himself and the other Jews who had come to share the good news of Jesus with these churches. He says, we ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners. And Paul is remembering that from his point of view, there was a great advantage in being born a Jew. I mean, this meant that he had the 10 Commandments, Moses' law, given into his culture. On the other hand, for all the others who were born into the Gentile, the non-Jewish nations, they did not have such a clear view of right and wrong. How could they help but be sinners? Pity the poor Gentile. But then Paul says right away, it's one thing to know the difference between right and wrong, and another to do it. He can't look at himself and say, I know God's law. I know his command to love. And that's why I can look at my life and say that I was always pulling it off. No, Paul says here in verse 16, we know that a person is not justified. We're not set right before God by doing the works of God's law. And so we Jews also have believed in Christ Jesus, in order that we would be justified by faith in Christ. It's not about our doing the works of the law. By the works of the law, says Paul, no one will be justified. Seems crazy then to blame Jesus for dividing people. Because in fact, Jesus is the one who loves all people. Wholehearted love. Jesus is the one who calls all people to live as Moses commanded, to live with this love. You must be perfect, he says on the Sermon on the Mount. You've got to live with that love. You must be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect. And so, not dividing people. Jesus finally is the one who shows that one and all people are the same. In fact, we all are sinners. We know what love is, but we don't always do it. Only one kind of person. I actually like this as a starting point to talk about our Christian faith. Because it means that when we're dealing with people who don't yet know Jesus, we don't have to come off with this holier-than-thou attitude. We recognize that we too are lawbreakers. We too do not always love. We too sin. We're in the same category as everybody else. I, as a pastor, don't have to pretend to be something that I'm not. I'm a beggar, delighting in forgiveness. And when you look at the history of Jesus walking this world in his ministry, really